I recently opened up 20 packages from eBay. They were all containing used computer parts. I got pretty good deals on them. I also got some pretty crazy packaging on some of the parts. I'm using some of the deals that I bought and I'm building an all used gaming PC from eBay. Well, sorta, I kinda lied. Some of the parts didn't make sense buying used, like the case, CPU cooler, and storage. But the CPU, motherboard, RAM, GPU, and power supply were all bought used. You'll see later on in the benchmarks that this computer performs pretty good. You can play games like Helldivers 2 above 60 FPS and Cyberpunk above 60 FPS as well. This gaming PC cost me under $400, and in my opinion, it provides great value for the money, and I'm making this video just to show you that gaming on a budget is possible. Let's have a word from our sponsor, then we'll go over all the parts. This video is sponsored by Super CDK. If you've built a gaming PC before, you've probably seen that watermark that's telling you to activate Windows. Or if you flip computers for profit, then you need to activate those builds as well. Instead of overpaying for a retail key, visit Super CDK down below. They have Windows 10 keys for as low as $17 and Windows 11 keys for as low as $22 when you apply the discount code SPLA. Whatever Windows version you end up going with, the discount code will save you at least $5. Once you get the key, activating it is super easy. You just copy and paste it into your window activation settings, click activate, and bam, you got rid of that watermark. Thank you, Super CDK, and be sure to check out their links in the description. For our CPU, I know people are gonna have opinions about it, but I'm going with the Ryzen 7 2700X, 8 cores, 16 threads, base speed of 3.7 gigahertz. Now it is on the Zen Plus architecture. It's built on the 12 nanometer process and it only has 16 megabytes of L3 cache. Now, as I said, people are gonna have opinions and they're probably gonna say, bro, just go with the Ryzen 5 3600. And yes, you're right, you will get more performance going with the Ryzen 5 3600. Despite that processor only having 6 cores and 12 threads, it is built on a newer architecture and it's built on a 7 nanometer process. What makes it faster really is the 32 megabytes of L3 cache that it has. If you are wanting to repeat this build, then I do recommend you go with that Ryzen 5 3600. The reason I'm using this Ryzen 7 2700X, I do flip computers, so I'm kind of doing an experiment to see if Ryzen 7 sells better. And you'll see later on in the benchmarks that it's still a pretty solid performer. Now our motherboard is another thing that people are gonna have opinions about. I'm going with this Gigabyte A320M S2H. Now yes, it is an A320 board, but it's still on the AM4 platform, and for a budget build, it's really all you need. It has 2 RAM slots, M.2 slot, and USB ports so you can plug in your mouse and keyboard. Sure, it doesn't have Wi-Fi or dual M.2 slots, but for a budget build, like I said, this is really all you need. It'll run all your parts perfectly fine. If you want a Wi-Fi compatible motherboard, then I recommend you check out that ASRock B450M ACR 2.0. It's around like $90 brand new, has 4 RAM slots, M.2 slot, and built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Now for RAM, I'm keeping it pretty basic. I got this Corsair Vengeance 2x 8GB kits, 16 gigs DDR4, clocked at 3200 megahertz. I bought this on eBay for $18.21, and I think the reason why I got it for such a good deal, in the ad it said 8GB times 2, and I think everyone just saw 8GB and kind of just was like, oh, I don't want 8 gigs. But I looked closely at the pictures and verified that it was a 16GB kit. For the SSD, this is one of the new parts that I actually went with. You can buy used, but I do just prefer buying new and recommend buying new. It's just kind of a peace of mind for your storage device. What I went with is King Spec 1TB Gen 3 M.2 SSD. This was around $60 on Amazon, and I like this one because it actually comes with an M.2 screw. And if you're buying a used motherboard, sometimes they don't come with the M.2 screw, so it's nice to have. Now for another new part is a CPU cooler. I went with no other than the ID Cooling SE214XT ARGB. This doesn't really need an introduction. I use it in almost all of my builds. It's like a sub $20 CPU cooler, 120mm fan, ARGB. Can't really ask for much more. There's options by like Thermalright and other brands, but I've used this one all the time, so can't cheat on it. Now back to the used parts, we got the power supply here. This is an EVGA 500 watt unit. It's the EVGA 500B, 80 plus bronze. It has your standard ketchup and mustard cables, so this would be perfect for a barbecue on like Saturday, and it will be perfect to power this build. Since it does have those ugly ketchup and mustard cables, I am going to add some cable extensions just to make it look a little bit more appealing. I'm just using some basic black ones. These were around $22 on Amazon. They get the job done. And now for the part that actually makes it a budget gaming PC, the GPU. I'm going with the GTX 1080 Founders Edition. This was honestly bought for a pretty good deal on eBay, sub $80. They typically sell for around $120. This Founders Edition looks pretty sick. I love the green little logo, and it only requires one 8-pin PCIe, so that power supply will be perfect for it. Now for the final part of this build, it's the case, and I'm actually going with something a little bit different. Now sure, it is kind of the same popular fish tank style design, so how is it different? One day I was just scrolling on Amazon. I was trying to find a different case other than the DIY PC and SAMA cases that I typically use. And I came across this one. It's from a brand I've never heard before. It's like Okinos. It's their Aqua 3. It's a pretty nice and compact micro ATX case. I paid right around $60 on Amazon. Came with Prime shipping, and it looks to be a pretty nice case. Comes with 3 ARGB fans. And a really awesome feature that I love, it has a built-in RGB controller in the rear. And it also has one additional slot on that controller so you can plug in any extra RGB accessories, and they all link up to this little button on the front, and that'll control all the colors. I don't know how good it is because I obviously haven't built in it yet, so stay tuned till the end and I'll share my thoughts on this case. Anyways, total cost for all these parts is right around $387. I think that's pretty good, especially for the performance we're gonna get. Stay tuned to the end to see that performance, but now let's build this thing. Quick disclaimer, you can get this build closer to $325 by going with a cheaper case, non-RGB CPU cooler, and no cable extensions. But as I said, I do flip computers, so I want the build to look semi-decent for reselling purposes. All right, cue the build. Well, here's the computer. Honestly, it was pretty easy to build in this case. First impressions of it, it feels nice, but I don't really like how there's no intake fans. It looks like you can maybe mount some here at the bottom under the GPU, but there's very limited space. Flip the power switch. Let's see if I built it correctly. Okay, all the fans are lighting up, so we know the RGB controller works. Let's go ahead and see if it actually is ARGB. Ooh, and it is. I forgot to mention the cable management, and it's decent. I mean, I had cable extensions, a non-modular power supply, and I was able to fit everything in the rear of the case and put the side panel on with really no issue after zip tying everything down. Time for some benchmarks. This computer performs pretty good, but there was a couple issues I came across when testing. The first issue, the GPU was getting quite hot and pretty fast. I took it apart, but I had to go to Home Depot for a 4mm socket to take off these weird screws on the Founders Edition card. I wiped off the old thermal paste and applied some fresh Arctic MX6, and you'll see in the benchmarks the GPU still reaches 82C, but not as fast. The second issue is the RAM, and I know I was so happy that I got a good deal on that RAM, but it was just causing random crashes and blue screens. I ran a mem test on it and it had a lot of errors, so I popped in a fresh kit and it worked out great. And luckily I can still return that first RAM kit, so all is good there. Starting the benchmarks off, I ran a time spy and the system scored 7,405. In Helldivers 2, I tested at 1080p with high settings and it averaged 59 FPS. I was in a pretty crazy area and it kept having some minor lag spikes, so I dropped the settings to the medium preset, and after that, those lag spikes were gone. The game still looked pretty good and we averaged 70 FPS with a 1% low of 63. In Cyberpunk, I ran the in-game benchmark at 1080p with the high settings preset, which by default enables upscaling. I left everything as it was and it ran great with an average FPS of 71 and 1% low of 51. In Hogwarts Legacy, I was just running around dilly-dallying, and the only way to run at 1080p was in window mode, so I'm not sure how accurate these results are, but I had it set to the high settings preset and we averaged 58 FPS. Now hopping into some esports titles, I tested Fortnite. Of course I had it at performance mode. I feel like a lot of people playing this game run it at performance mode, at least if they're on a budget computer, but tell me if I'm wrong in the comments. At 1080p in the reload mode, we were able to average 239 FPS with a 1% low of 129. In Apex Legends, I played at 1080p with high settings, except on the shadow and lighting options, I had those toggled to low, and with that, we were able to average 132 FPS with a 1% low of 101. Apex used to be harder to run, but it's gotten pretty optimized over the years, so that's awesome for budget gamers. Unlike Fortnite, which I swear only gets harder to run. In Warzone Resurgence, this is a game I used to hate, but now I frequently find myself enjoying it. I was running around trying to shoot people, but holy, I'm a freaking bot or something. I'll be honest, this was my third time playing and I didn't get any kills today. The game ran great at 1080p with the balance preset and we averaged 82 FPS. Well, what do you think of this computer? I personally think it's great and it still has an upgrade path despite it being an A320 board. Now, buying used can obviously give you issues as you've seen in this video, but if you can overcome those issues, it can be really good. And I like buying on eBay because the protection you have as an actual buyer, especially when you use PayPal. I've never lost money on eBay and let's hope it stays that way. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe if you loved it. And if you want to watch the video where I open up the 20 eBay packages that make up this gaming PC, then go ahead and click here.